Hi and welcome. Today I have a tag bundle. It's got lots of different layers and everything in it, and I start out with a full sheet of mixed media paper. It's 9 by 11, and this stencil that I'm using I cut on my Cricut, and this one too. And I'm just kind of making a few layers of distress ink. The first one was vintage photo, and the second one is gray. I will list it in the comments unless I think of it ahead of time. And then the third one is stormy sky, and there I'm using a Tim Holtz stencil, and I'm just putting flowers randomly around. And I'm taking some water and just flicking it in different places, and I'm moving the water around and drying it. And then I put the whole sheet on my Cricut and cut various sizes of tags, and I even have a scrap left over that I might use. And so they're all starting out with the same base, but they're gonna end up looking very different by the time, but yet they still, I hope it's still cohesive because they started out with the same base. And so I've decided I want to have a few of them have some sort of texture paste. And so on this one I'm adding some crackle paste and using a Tim Holtz stencil. And so I do the crackle paste on two of them with two different stencils. This also is a Tim Holtz stencil. And as soon as I'm done, I have a little tub of water beside me, and I just throw it in that tub so that it won't ruin the stencil, and it's easy to clean off. Basically, I'll just have to rinse it off once I'm done. And I was not thinking how fast this texture paste was gonna dry. I'm in Florida, and so usually I don't have a problem with things drying quickly. But when you see me try to put the texture paste on this stencil right here, it doesn't adhere well. And so, but I roll with it. I try to add some other media on there so that it will get the texture paste. I will list these colors. I know the orange is crackling something. I'm at a loss for it. I'm terrible with names. The dark one I think is, no, it's not there either. So I'll list them down in the comments what colors I used. But there's so many colors and so many things used here that it's going to be really difficult to catch everything that I used. This video was 2 hours long, more than 2 hours, and I sped it up and I cut out a lot of extra stuff, and still it was going to be too long. So this is going to be a two-parter, and so I'll work on it, and then when it gets about halfway, then I'm gonna split it, and the rest will be in part 2. So I've got 4 things that I have put some texture paste and embossed, and those are gonna dry before I actually get the embossing tool out. But there I'm just taking some VersaFine, and then putting some white embossing powder on it. So I'm just wanting to have a whole bunch of different things that I'm using in this pack of of tags. Here I'm using the Versamark and a Tim Holtz stamp that's from the mini bouquet series, and this is just some black off-brand embossing powder. I'll try to call it out as I know it, and because like I said, there's just so much that's going to go on. And so I have embossed this tag and the flower tag, and I'm adding some Mariner's blue. I think I've got that name. Uncharted Mariner, that's what it is. Around the edges, because blue was on the original sheet, so I'm wanting to bring a bunch of blue in. I'm adding a little other colors. This here I believe is walnut stain. Like I said, I used so many different products, it's hard to remember. And so I'm adding the stamp. This is from the Eccentric stamp collection from Stampers Anonymous. And this twiggy looking thing is from the mini bouquet. And I used I believe that color is something twig. I'm trying to remember the colors. I'll try to list them in the description. Here I'm adding some seedless preserve Oxide through a Tim Holtz stencil, and just this is one of the other colors I wanted to bring in. I also did that in the embossing glaze as well on one of the tags. And so I wet the tag and then flipped it over, so I got the tag print and then the reverse of the stencil print, and the reverse of the stencil print. So it kind of has this watercolor look effect. And I distressed around the edges with walnut stain or maybe vintage photo. And now I'm taking a gold Posca Paint Pen, and I have a quote about flowers, and so I'm just kind of writing it on top of the whole tag, and where it crosses over the embossing, all I have to do is kind of wipe it and it goes. So it will look like it's underneath all that stenciling, even though I did it later. Oh, I thought I already did buff the edges, but here I am, and I believe that's walnut stain. Okay, so now I'm coming back to these guys that I have embossed, or that I have the texture paste on, and I'm just trying to do the embossing, and I'm not sitting through to let you see it because this video was just way too long. And here I'm taking some faded jeans around the edges. It's not as dark as the Uncharted Mariner, so I wanted to get some variation. And then I'm buffing up the edge. I actually don't think that is walnut stain. I'm trying to think of what it is. I think there's one with the name Twig in it, and I just can't think of what it is. And so, since purple was one of the colors I added, I took some, this is Daler-Rowney's acrylic ink, and I think the color is purple. But I kind of spattered it, and then I'm adding water and just kind of moving it around a little bit just to give it a watercolor look. I want it to look messy. And because the distress inks had not been sealed, they kind of merged into the ink, and so then I have a variety of different colors, which I loved. So I'm taking a little bit of collage paper from Ideology, Tim Holtz, and that I believe is the entomology collage paper. And so there's different ways to mount it. Here I am using some Liquitex matte varnish and just kind of putting it where I think it's going to go, trying to get it smoothed in there, and then just cover it up and seal it with more collage medium. That's the matte varnish Liquitex. And when I put these aside, that doesn't mean I'm done with them, because they're gonna probably get more things later on. So here I'm taking one of the brown, it's not walnut stain, espresso maybe, and just kind of putting it into, because this is the crackle paste, and so I'm just kind of adding it to seep down into the crackle. And here I'm spraying it to kind of get up what's on top of the crackle paste, because I do still want that orange to shine through. And then I spritz it with a little bit of salvaged patina. And it gets dry, and I'm taking more of that brown. Any of the browns would work, but I think there's got to be something with twig in it or something. And so I just put a little bit of the text on the corners, buffing up the edges with some Uncharted Mariner. And I wanted the backs to have something on them. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the backs, so I'm just kind of like mopping up ink at times, or usually that's what it is, or I use a stencil to add ink and then I set it off to dry. Now I probably mopped it up with something else so it didn't just disappear and get thrown away. I also have a book that I mop up with and just kind of stick it all in a book. But and here the stamp is from the Eccentric from Stampers Anonymous. And I took another piece of that collage paper. I don't think this is the same one though. I'll have to look to see which one this came from. I've got 3 different ones. And so I did the same thing. I laid it down on top of the card and then put more of the matte varnish on top of it. And so here I'm taking a crackling campfire. That's what that orange is. Taking some of the crackling campfire and putting it through this stencil. It's a Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous stencil. And I just love that. Look at this one. And so I just kind of just go around the tiniest bit with the edges with Stormy Sky. That's the lightest blue that I'm using. This corner that wasn't quite down. And I have this little stamp. It's the number 3, and that's from the Eccentric, and I didn't want it to be black, so I think I used one of the gray archival stamps. It's a darker gray, maybe slate gray or something. I can't remember what the name of it was. And then I buff up the edges. That Perfection also was from the Eccentric tab or stampers. This one's from the Eccentric, and that arch just looked to me like it was a dial and it needed a pointer. And I wish I had a pointer stamp, but there probably is one somewhere on one of Tim Holtz. But so I decided, well, I'll make this finger pointing into one. So I used the Versamark and just stamped it and put on, that looks like black embossing powder. And then I just took a little tiny bit of the seedless preserves and water and painted inside that little pointy hand. And you'll see me later attach that. And that's all there is for today. And join me with part 2 and we'll see the rest of it come together.